As the fog descended over the Donetsk-based city of Pokrovsk, Russia's forces stirred. Finally, a blanket of cover that could shield their movements from reconnaissance and FPV drones. The Russians moved. The fog didn't help. Vladimir Putin's forces entered the fog and never came out, as they faced a fate worse than death that they couldn't even see coming. On February 1st, the Kyiv Post reported on Ukraine's stunning destruction of a pair of major Russian assaults in the Pokrovsk direction, both of which occurred on the same day. We'll be covering the full details of that assault throughout the video, but here are the headlines. Multiple Russian platoons, many operating vehicles, attempted to enter Pokrovsk and the nearby settlement of Rashina under the cover of a bleak winter fog. But far from being the perfect weather to enable infiltrations, the fog ended up being a location of a bloodbath that eliminated close to 100 of Putin's forces, in addition to several of Russia's vehicles. 2 Ukrainian units were primarily involved in repelling the Russian forces. Among them was the Spartan National Guard Brigade. The brigade took to Telegram to announce what it had done, stating, "Spartan, together with adjacent units, repelled the enemy's assault. Almost 4 platoons of Russians were destroyed in a day," the brigade announced. It added that around 90 assault troops were used by the Russian forces in their attack, with 80 of those troops being destroyed. Spartan worked alongside the infamous Birds of Magyar, which is the unmanned aerial vehicle unit led by Robert Brovdy, to track the Russian assault forces even as they tried to hide within the fog. The result was inevitable: death and destruction of Putin's invaders on a massive scale. Beyond the 80 deaths that we already mentioned, the Spartan Brigade said that a pair of Russian soldiers were already wounded, adding to the casualty count, and 2 others were taken into custody by Ukraine. On the equipment front, Russia lost 10 all-terrain vehicles, or ATVs, 4 motorcycles and 6 cars. Yes, these are all civilian cars, and we're going to tell you why Russia is using them soon. We don't have to take the Spartan Brigade's word for all this either. The unit backed up everything that it said with a 2-minute video that it published on its Telegram channel, and that's also been shared by several outlets, including UNN. Some of the footage is graphic, so we won't be able to show it all here, but from the moment the video starts, with pounding music in the background, we see a Russian vehicle bursting into flames against the stark white backdrop of the harsh Ukrainian winter. Presumably, that vehicle was hit by an FPV drone, and there were many more to come. We also see footage shot from the perspective of some Ukrainian FPV drones that show just how deep the fog goes. Flying through murky greyness, the drones confirm the destruction of vehicles and, in some cases, fly directly to targets that can barely see them before it's too late. The video also shows explosives being dropped from great heights, again, presumably by drones operated by the Birds of Magyar, along with more graphic images of the aftermath of some of Ukraine's attacks. Russian casualties are seen lying in the thin layer of snow in footage that brings back home the stark and brutal reality of the war that Putin is waging against Ukraine, along with the fate that awaits many of the Russian soldiers who were sent into assaults against Pokrovsk by their leader. And so the video continues. We see more burnt-out husks of cars, attacks on Russian soldiers riding motorcycles, and more bombs being dropped from the skies. In one gruesome scene, likely captured by a reconnaissance drone, we see a Russian soldier decked out in white clothing attempting to outrun an FPV drone that is on his tail. The soldier has no chance. An attempt to duck through the trees fails. The drone explodes. One more of Putin's soldiers goes down on a night that claimed the lives of more than 80 of them. This is the war that Putin started. And Ukraine has proven itself exceptionally effective at destroying Russia's increasingly ragtag assaults in the Pokrovsk direction, fog or no fog. Ukraine's destruction of Russia's assaults didn't stop there on January 31st. On the same day that the Spartan Brigade reported on its success in the Pokrovsk direction, Ukraine's 7th Airborne Assault Corps also took to Telegram to announce the success of its counterattack against a Russian mechanized assault on the village of Rashina. There are several reasons why Russia wants to get its hands on this settlement. As revealed by Medusa, Rashina lies to the northwest of Pokrovsk, making it a strong candidate for Putin's forces to launch assaults on Pokrovsk from a new direction, should they be able to capture the village. Rashina is also named by Medusa as Ukraine's main logistics hub in the area north of Pokrovsk, giving Russia a second reason to want to occupy the village. No more Rashina could mean no more route into the north of Pokrovsk for Ukraine's soldiers and equipment, thus giving some of Russia's assaults a better chance of actually succeeding. Critical Threat reports that Russian command told soldiers that they had a deadline of January 1st to capture Rashina. Obviously, that deadline has come and gone, and it seems like Russia is no closer to occupying the village than it was toward the end of 2025. The same outlet adds that the open terrain that lies between Rashina and Pokrovsk is also causing massive problems for Putin's forces. With only some tree cover and little in the way of smaller settlements between the two in which Russia's soldiers can take cover, the troops are simply attempting to cross the wide-open terrain as fast as they can to assault Ukraine's positions in Pokrovsk and Rashina. You can already see the lack of success Russia is enjoying in this endeavor. That open terrain has become a graveyard for dozens, perhaps even hundreds of Russia's soldiers. With that, we come back to the 7th Airborne Assault Corps and its telegram post. 2 units of burned armored vehicles and more than 10 liquidated Russians. Defense forces repelled the assault on Rashinoye, the Corps said, using an alternative name for Rashina. So we have the numbers. These at least 10 eliminated Russian soldiers add to those that the Spartan Brigade destroyed in the Pokrovsk direction to give Russia a casualty count of a little over 90 for its assaults on January 31st. There appears to have been a tinge of desperation to this mechanized assault on Rashina, as the Corps reveals. Russian troops attempted a mechanized assault on the settlement using 3 units of armored vehicles. Thus, the enemy decided to accelerate the pace of the offensive on Groshoina due to the impossibility of implementing the plan using infiltration tactics, the Corps reports. We guess sneaking in under the cover of fog didn't go well, based on that assessment. The same unit adds that Ukraine's 155th Separate Mechanized Brigade discovered the attempted Russian assault, leading to it working alongside several other Ukrainian units to shut down the Russian attack, both on the outskirts of Rashina and on the approaches to the village. The remaining Russians fled. They left behind more than 10 of their comrades and 2 destroyed armored vehicles. January as a whole has been a terrible month for Russia as it attempts to take Pokrovsk. Assaults have been shut down left, right, and center. We're going to give you the full picture in just a moment. But first, if you want to stay ahead of the curve with everything that's happening in Pokrovsk, hit the subscribe button. Back to the assaults. The Kyiv Post reports that Ukraine's general staff has revealed that as of February 1st, Ukraine's forces have managed to repel 80 of Russia's assaults in the Pokrovsk direction, presumably since the beginning of 2026. Pokrovsk itself has been attacked repeatedly, as has the village of Rashina that we just mentioned, along with another major Ukrainian settlement named Mirnorad. Other assaults have focused on the settlement of Yampil, including one in early January that saw Ukraine take out a pair of Russian assaults, in which Russia again used ATVs, perhaps as an attempt to counter the harsh weather that would have made attacking on foot difficult. Specifically, January 6th saw Russia attempt an assault on Yampil under the cover of poor weather and heavy snowfall. This assault was detected, leading to Ukraine deploying its Signum Battalion drone operators to shut it down. 2 days earlier, Russia had attempted an assault on Pokrovsk using ATVs, only to be destroyed by the Syczeslaw Separate Airborne Brigade. Over and over again, Russia's forces attack. Ukraine has the answer every single time. What all of this means is that Ukraine still holds Pokrovsk, along with several of the surrounding settlements, and that's massive for several reasons. First, Putin has set a deadline of April 2026 for his forces to capture the Donbass, which amounts to capturing Donetsk. Almost all of Luhansk is under Russia's control. Pokrovsk and all the other settlements that we've spoken about in this video happen to be in Donetsk. It's now February, and Pokrovsk still stands. April is an impossible deadline for Russia to meet, especially as Putin's forces still have the terrifying fortress belt of cities, several of which are larger than Pokrovsk, to overcome. Second, there's Pokrovsk itself. One of the key goals of Putin's summer offensive was to capture Pokrovsk before the cold started to set in. Russia failed. At the beginning of December, Russia claimed that it had finally captured Pokrovsk on the eve of a new round of peace talks, where Putin clearly attempted to use the supposed fall of the city as leverage to gain more favorable terms. But Russia was lying. Pokrovsk is starting to feel like an unbeatable city for Russia's forces, a veritable ghost town to which soldiers are sent, never to return. Ukraine's defense of Pokrovsk is costing Russia thousands of troops and hundreds of units of equipment, all of which will mean that Putin's planned assault on the fortress belt, should that assault ever come, will be weak. This isn't speculation. Ukraine believes that Pokrovsk may only have to hold out until the spring for Russia's forces in the region to be completely exhausted. At least that's the opinion of the leader of Ukraine's 7th Rapid Reaction Corps, General Yevhen Lasichuk, who spoke to the BBC on January 23rd. He revealed that the strength of Russia's assaults on Pokrovsk is waning, which is a subject we'll cover in a few moments, so keep watching to learn more, as well as that Ukraine's assessments suggest that Putin's forces are weaker in the Donetsk region than Russia's leader wants the world to believe. Pokrovsk itself is certainly far further away from the Russian capture than Putin claims. Lasichuk reveals that Ukraine still holds much of the northern part of the city and that the combat lines are actually further away from Pokrovsk than that. "No, we are exercising fire control even before this line," the general says after the BBC asked about the combat lines. He added, "Our positions are in the northern part. If we were to outline the line of combat contact in Pokrovsk, it would be the railway and in Mirnorad. It will be the area of 5-story buildings. Then Lasachuk makes his revelation. I think that by the spring, the enemy will be exhausted and will slightly stop the pace of his advance, his offensive. But this, again, if some other reserve is not involved, for example the Marine Corps. We know that it's being coordinated and replenished. I'm not sure that it will be used in this direction, but it's possible, the general tells the BBC. January 31st was just the latest example of something that has been happening in the Pokrovsk direction for months. Russia tries to launch assaults. Ukraine destroys those assaults, often before they ever reach the location that they're supposed to be targeting. Ukrainian Brigadier General Oleg Apostol says as much during a January 22nd interview with Novinania, was recorded the previous December. According to Apostol, Ukraine's forces win in about 90% of the cases where there is close combat with Russia's troops near Pokrovsk, which only heaps more misery onto Putin. Most of Russia's Pokrovsk assaults are being shut down long before the prospect of close quarters combat arises. On the few occasions where Russian troops do manage to navigate the myriad of defenses that surround Pokrovsk, the vast majority simply end up joining their eliminated comrades a little later than if they had been taken out by Ukraine's drones and other defenses. Even when Russia does enjoy partial success, such as in assaults where Putin's forces have used the winter fog surrounding Pokrovsk before, that success doesn't last long. Yes, in this direction the Russians sometimes have partial success, for example when there was thick fog, but even those occasional successes were neutralized by our units and the Russians were destroyed, Apostol reveals. There is just one catch to all of this Ukrainian success in Pokrovsk. Ukraine currently can't build on it. To fully restore control over Pokrovsk requires enormous resources. We cannot afford that right now, Apostol reveals. But even then, he adds a disclaimer that the forces Ukraine has stationed in Pokrovsk can make some positive headway against the Russian invaders, albeit not to the point where the occupied portions of the city can be retaken. Right now, there is a stalemate. One that is being reinforced every time that Ukraine does something like destroy about 100 Russian troops, along with their vehicles, as they attempt assaults in the Pokrovsk direction. Let's return to Russia's failed assaults on January 31st. We told you earlier that those assaults have revealed the state of the Russian attack in the Pokrovsk direction, and it's a long way from where it needs to be. There are a few things that Russia is attempting to do in the hope of taking the city, and using the cover of fog is chief among them. And you can't blame Russia for that. It's enjoyed some limited success with this strategy before. Back in November in particular, Russia seemed to be making the most out of the adverse weather conditions. Both BBC and Forbes reported on this, with the former pointing out that dense fog around Pokrovsk had allowed some Russian soldiers to infiltrate into the city. At the time, the outlet says Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky estimated that Russia had managed to sneak between 300 and 500 soldiers into Pokrovsk. Russia had even dared to launch a mechanized assault on the city, which it only did because the fog was thick enough to obscure Ukraine's aerial view of the battlefield that it usually gets from its reconnaissance drones. The assault failed. The Ukrainian soldier who uses the call sign Goose confirmed that. However, Goose also pointed out that the fog had made it impossible for Ukraine to determine how much of the assaulting column had been destroyed, which is another problem in terms of tracking the effectiveness of counterattacks and the future strength of Russian assaults. In a November 28th article for Forbes, Vikram Mittal also noted that Russia had managed to make some advances due to the winter weather grounding some of Ukraine's drones. Bad weather also degrades the optical systems on the drone, which use a small forward-mounted camera to produce a live video feed. Fog, snowfall, and heavy rain reduce contrast and depth perception, significantly reducing visibility, Mittal pointed out, before adding, in dense fog, the operator might lose sight of obstacles, trenches, or even the target itself, increasing the chance of crashing or striking unintended positions. In other words, Russia has been trying to use general winter to its advantage. And for a while, the vulnerabilities seemingly inherent in Ukraine's drones allowed that to work. However, January 31st shows that Ukraine still has answers, even when Russia is trying to use the fog as cover. The likelihood is that Russia's attempts to cross the open ground between Pokrovsk and Rashina, that we mentioned earlier in the video, played a role. After all, limited visibility doesn't mean no visibility. And when all you have as cover is a few scattered trees, even fog isn't going to stop Ukraine's deadly drones from hunting you down eventually. Of course, Russia's assault units also didn't help themselves by using vehicles that nobody in their right mind would classify as armed. ATVs, motorbikes, and civilian cars may be okay choices for traversing rough winter terrain in normal circumstances, but using them in the Ukraine war is practically suicidal, and yet Russia has been doing it for some time. Back in February 2024, Business Insider reported on Russia using quad bikes to launch fast nighttime raids on Ukrainian positions. The concept was set in stone by that point. Tanks and armored vehicles, though they provided some protection, can be hit repeatedly by Ukraine's FPV drones. Lighter vehicles are faster and more agile, meaning they have a chance of evading. Of course, the soldier riding an ATV or motorcycle doesn't stand much of a chance if one of Ukraine's drones catches up to them. CNN highlighted that fact over a year after the Business Insider report, as it pointed out that the UK's Ministry of Defence had already reported that the vehicles Russia had started using were vulnerable. And it makes sense. Yes, a motorbike or ATV may be faster than a tank, but even those vehicles have to slow down when their riders are trying to negotiate difficult terrain. The only thing they've got going for them is that they're small, which can make them more difficult to spot. Perhaps that's what Russia had hoped for on January 31st. If that's the case, the hopes were dashed. What was supposed to be a day that Russia launched several large assaults against Pokrovsk and Rashina ended up being yet another humiliation for Putin and his forces. The ATVs and bikes didn't work. They were destroyed, along with the soldiers riding them, in yet another example of how the supposedly fallen city of Pokrovsk has become a terrifying meat grinder that chews up Russian soldiers and spits them right back out again. Not even General Winter could save Russia this time. Frankly, the legendary general hasn't been helping Russia at all since the cold weather descended on Ukraine. The winter conditions that have for so long served Russia are killing Putin's soldiers on the front lines, sometimes even before Ukraine's drones can do the job. Check out our video if you want to find out more. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe to The Military Show for more updates on what's happening in the Pokrovsk direction. And thank you as always for watching.